She looked at me like she already knew the truth I was trying so hard to hide. It started with a glance she shouldn't have noticed and a feeling I couldn't ignore. She said, "You've got that look again." And for the first time, I realized she was right. There's a line between respect and desire, and I spent the whole summer standing on it. She was older, wiser, untouchable, until the night she saw through me. I hadn't planned on coming back, but when I stepped off the bus and felt that familiar chill in the evening air, something inside me stilled. The town hadn't changed much. The same crooked streetlights, the same scent of salt from the harbor, the same lazy rhythm that made every moment feel a little longer than it should. I told myself it was just a short visit, a few days to clear my head, to remember who I used to be. But the truth is, I think some part of me was hoping to see her again. It happened sooner than I expected. I was walking past the small cafe near the square, the one with fogged-up windows and the old radio humming softly inside, when I heard someone call my name. Her voice cut through the quiet like warm light through smoke. I turned, and there she was, Elena. She looked almost the same, but softer somehow. Her hair was a little shorter, streaked faintly with silver near the temples. Her coat hung open in the wind, and she held a takeaway cup in one hand, her fingers pale against the cardboard. When she smiled, it wasn't the polite, kind people give out of habit. It was slower, more uncertain, like she wasn't sure if she should. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. "Elena," I said, my voice catching somewhere between surprise and relief. She laughed quietly. "You remember me?" "Of course I do." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. The same expression she used years ago when she was trying to read a person, not just their words. "You look different," she said, her tone thoughtful. "Older, but not really." I didn't know how to respond, so I smiled and looked down. That's when she stepped closer, close enough that the scent of her perfume drifted through the air, soft and familiar, like cedar and something faintly floral. She handed me her spare cup of coffee, saying, "You always liked it black, right?" I hadn't realized she remembered. We stood there under the awning as the rain began to fall, the kind of drizzle that blurs everything, headlights, windows, even thoughts. She talked about her art studio, about the local gallery that just opened, about small things that filled her days. I listened, not just to her words, but to the rhythm of her voice, the little pauses between sentences where silence seemed to mean more. Every now and then, our eyes met, brief, quiet collisions that said what neither of us dared to. When she finally had to leave, she touched my arm lightly, just above the wrist. It was nothing, a casual, friendly gesture, but the warmth of it lingered long after she walked away. As the rain deepened and I stood alone under the awning, I caught myself smiling. Not because of what she said, but because for the first time in a long while, I felt something stir. Something that felt a lot like beginning again. It started as something small, a casual suggestion, made half in passing. She mentioned she liked to walk after work, just to clear her mind, and before I knew it, I was meeting her by the harbor most afternoons. No plans, no expectations. Just two people pretending the walk was about fresh air, when both of us knew it was about something else entirely. The path ran along the cliffs, overlooking the sea. Most days, the wind carried the scent of salt and wildflowers, and the light would turn golden around 5. She'd walk just ahead of me, her hands tucked in her coat pockets, hair catching bits of sunlight like strands of copper. We talked about ordinary things, the bakery that closed, her new painting, the books stacked by my bed I hadn't finished yet. But beneath every word was that same quiet pull, like a current we were both drifting in without meaning to. Sometimes she'd laugh, that low, steady laugh that always came with a soft shake of her head, as if she couldn't quite believe me. It made something in my chest loosen every time. At one point, we stopped near the edge of the hill, where the grass bent with the breeze and the whole harbor stretched out below us. The world looked almost suspended in that golden hour light, calm, still, almost too perfect to touch. She was talking about her students, the young painters who reminded her of herself at their age. There was something wistful in her voice, something that lived between pride and sadness. You ever miss it? I asked quietly. The version of you before everything got serious? She smiled, looking out toward the water. All the time. Then, after a pause, you don't realize you've changed until someone who used to know you shows up again. The words lingered in the air, and when she turned her head, her gaze met mine. The wind picked up, lifting her scarf slightly, and without thinking, I reached out to keep it from slipping away. My fingers brushed the side of her neck. Just a second, barely contact, but it was enough. She didn't move right away. Her breath caught. I could see the question flicker behind her eyes. Not anger, not even surprise, but something closer to recognition. And then she said it quietly, with a trace of a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You've got that look again, like you want to cross a line. Her voice was steady, but her heart beat. I swear I could feel it in the air between us. I didn't answer. I just let the silence stretch, the sound of the wind and the sea filling all the space words would have ruined. When she finally looked away, I did too, pretending to study the sky, pretending my hands weren't still shaking. We walked back slowly that evening, saying almost nothing. But every time our shoulders brushed, it felt like we were standing right on that invisible line, one breath away from crossing it. It was a Thursday when she finally invited me in. We met for coffee, as usual, but the rain started earlier than expected, one of those sudden coastal downpours that turns the streets into mirrors. She hesitated before offering, "You can wait out at my studio. It's just down the block." Her tone was casual, but something in her eyes wasn't. The studio was tucked behind an old brick building, half hidden by ivy. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oil paint and old wood, warm, lived in, almost sacred. The floor creaked softly under our steps. A dozen unfinished canvases leaned against the walls, their colors caught halfway between meaning and mystery. "This is where you disappear," I said quietly, running my fingers along a table smudged with dried pigment. She smiled, setting her umbrella by the door. "Disappear or finally show up. Depends on the day." There was a softness to her that I hadn't seen before, a quiet concentration that seemed to hum beneath her every movement. She pushed up the sleeves of her sweater, revealing faint traces of paint on her wrists, and began mixing colors with the slow precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "Sit," she said, motioning toward a wooden stool by the window. "You'll ruin my light if you keep standing." Sit. She began to paint, not on a new canvas, but one already marked by layers of other attempts, as if she was painting over something rather than beginning from scratch. For a while, there was only the sound of rain on the windows and the gentle scrape of her brush. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it felt almost necessary, like the room itself was holding its breath. Every so often, she'd glance at me, a quick, assessing look, as though trying to decide whether she was painting me or something about me she couldn't name. At one point, she stepped closer, squinting slightly. "Hold still," she murmured. Then, with her thumb, she brushed a faint streak of paint from my cheek. Her touch was feather-light, but the warmth of her skin lingered like a secret. When she realized she hadn't pulled her hand back, she smiled. A small, nervous thing that betrayed her calm exterior. "You make it difficult to focus," she said, barely above a whisper. I could have said the same. For a few heartbeats, neither of us moved. The air felt charged, not loud or explosive, just alive, like the silence before confession. Then she turned away, setting her brush down with deliberate care. "Some moments," she said softly, "shouldn't be named. If we name them, they become real, and real things are harder to forget." Her words settled deep inside me, heavier than they sounded. When the rain finally stopped, she walked me to the door. Outside, the world smelled of wet earth and fresh beginnings. I told her I'd see her tomorrow. She hesitated, just long enough for hope to form. Before replying, "We'll see." And as I walked away, I realized that the hardest part wasn't crossing any line, it was pretending it wasn't already happening. The storm came without warning. By the time I reached her studio, the sky had turned the color of slate, and thunder rolled low across the harbor. I hesitated outside her door, rain soaking through my jacket, before finally knocking. She opened it almost immediately, as if she'd been standing there, waiting. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her voice carried that same calm tone she always used, but her eyes told a different story, tired, restless, like she hadn't slept in days. Inside, the light was dim, gold from a single lamp by the easel. Canvases leaned in quiet disarray, their painted faces glistening faintly under the storm's occasional flash. She'd been working. I could tell by the scent of turpentine and the small streak of blue across her wrist. "You shouldn't have walked in this weather," she murmured. "I didn't know it was going to start." A small lie. I'd seen the clouds. But I came anyway. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You always come anyway." Lightning flashed, filling the room for a heartbeat. The rain hit the windows hard, steady as a drumbeat. She moved to close them, and I followed, helping her tug the stubborn latch near the corner. Our shoulders brushed, and suddenly the air between us felt charged in a way the storm couldn't explain. When the last window was shut, she turned and looked up at me. Too close now, her breath warm against my throat. The sound of rain muffled everything else, leaving just the two of us, standing there like the world had narrowed to this one impossible second. Her voice dropped. "You shouldn't look at me like that. I can't seem to help it." She laughed, softly, almost sadly. "That's the problem." Something inside her cracked then, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet way a truth finally breaks free. She told me she was afraid, not of me, but of what wanting me would make her lose. Her reputation, her peace, the small, careful balance she'd built after years of disappointments she never talked about. "I've already been the fool once," she said. "I can't do it again." I told her I didn't want to be a mistake. I just wanted honesty. She turned away, bracing herself against the window pane, watching the rain streak down the glass. "You're too young to understand what losing costs," she whispered. I took a slow step closer, not touching her, just standing behind her, close enough for her to feel that I wasn't leaving. "Then let me learn it with you," I said quietly. For a long time, she said nothing. The thunder rolled again, softer now, like it was moving farther away. When she finally looked back, her eyes were wet, not from the storm. And though she didn't reach for me, she didn't step back either. The rain kept falling, steady and rhythmic, as if the world was trying to wash away everything that came before this moment. Neither of us crossed the line that night, but we both knew the line had already moved. The next morning, she was gone. The studio lights were off, curtains drawn tight. I knocked once, then again, but there was only silence, the kind that feels too deliberate to be accidental. A small note was taped to the door, taking some time away. "Don't worry." It didn't say when she'd be back. For the first few days, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. I told myself people drift, that maybe we'd both imagined what wasn't really there. But the truth was harder. Her absence had a weight, a kind of echo that followed me everywhere I went. I still walked the cliffs every evening, the same path where we'd talked about everything and nothing. The sea looked different now, emptier somehow, though it hadn't changed. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder every time the wind shifted, half expecting to see her walking toward me again, coat fluttering, eyes soft but cautious. She never did. I picked up work at the local library to pass the time. It was quiet, comforting in a way, but even there, reminders of her found me. A book with paint smudges on the cover, the faint scent of cedar from an old borrowed scarf someone left behind. Little ghosts of her presence that refused to fade. Nights were worse. I'd lie awake, listening to the rain tapping against the roof, and replay that last evening in my mind. The way her voice trembled when she said she was afraid, the look in her eyes when I told her I wasn't. I wondered if she regretted letting me see that side of her, the side that wasn't poised or careful, the side that felt. A week passed, then another. The silence between us grew until it felt like a third person in the room whenever I tried to think of her. And then one evening, she walked in. It was just before closing, the library almost empty, the lights soft and golden across the rows of books. She stood by the door for a moment before finding me at the counter. She looked composed, her hair pinned up, her voice steady when she said hello. But her eyes, they gave her away. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd come back." She nodded slowly, gaze falling to her hands. "I needed space," she said, "to remember what mattered before everything got complicated. I wanted to ask if I was part of what mattered, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, 'I'm glad you did.'" When she turned to leave, I reached out instinctively, fingers brushing her wrist. Not enough to hold her, just enough to say I'm still here. Her hand lingered for one heartbeat, then slipped away. As she walked out into the evening light, the air smelled faintly of rain again, the same way it had the first day I saw her. Only this time, it carried something else, the quiet ache of everything we hadn't said. It came on a Tuesday morning. I found it on my doorstep, half tucked under the welcome mat, a plain white envelope, my name written in her neat, deliberate handwriting. No return address, no explanation, just my name. For a moment, I thought about not opening it. Some part of me wanted to hold onto the possibility that it might say everything I hoped for or nothing at all. But curiosity and longing have a way of working together, and before I could stop myself, I was sitting at the kitchen table, fingers trembling as I unfolded the paper. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs, each word measured, careful, but undeniably hers. She wrote that she hadn't meant to disappear, that sometimes distance was the only way she knew how to think clearly. "You make me remember parts of myself I thought I'd outgrown," she said. "The hopeful parts, the reckless parts." She wrote about fear, too, about how affection at her age wasn't the same as it used to be. "When you've lost enough," she wrote, "you stop believing beginnings are real. You start thinking every warm thing will turn cold eventually." And then, near the end, her words softened. "But when I'm with you, the world feels quieter. My thoughts don't run so loud. You make me remember who I was before I stopped believing in beginnings." I must have read that line a dozen times. Each time, it hit a little deeper. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the distant murmur of the sea, seemed softer, like the whole world was holding its breath with me. By evening, I knew I couldn't just sit there. I needed to see her. I found her at the cafe, sitting by the window, the same spot where we first ran into each other weeks ago. She was reading, a half-empty cup beside her, the golden light of sunset painting her face in soft, forgiving tones. When she noticed me, she didn't look surprised, just quietly relieved, as if some part of her had known I would come. I didn't say anything. I just sat across from her, close enough that our knees brushed beneath the table. The air between us felt fragile, full of unspoken words. She folded her book, tracing the edge of the page with her thumb. "So," she said, almost a whisper, "you got my letter?" I nodded. I did. Neither of us moved for a long while. There was no need to fill the silence. It was enough just to be there, in the same place, breathing the same air again. When she finally smiled, small, hesitant but real, it felt like the first break of sunlight after weeks of gray. And in that quiet cafe, surrounded by the hum of life going on, something between us settled. Not fully resolved, but no longer running. For the first time, it felt like the line between us wasn't meant to be feared. It was meant to be understood. The days that followed felt different. Not brighter exactly, but lighter, as if something in the air had loosened. We didn't talk about the letter again. We didn't have to. The words she'd written had already changed something between us, softened the space where hesitation used to live. Most evenings we walked. No plans, no destination, just a slow rhythm of footsteps and quiet conversation winding through the edges of town. Sometimes she'd carry a thermos of tea. Sometimes I'd bring an old book to read aloud under the fading light. The world seemed to slow down around her. Even silence felt full when she was near. One evening, near the end of summer, we found ourselves back at the same hill overlooking the harbor, the one where she'd first said those words to me. "You've got that look again." The sky was painted in layers of amber and rose, the water catching every color. The air was cool, carrying that soft edge that hints at autumn. We stood there for a long while, saying nothing. I could feel the warmth of her beside me, our hands occasionally brushing, neither of us pulling away. After a while, she said, "Do you ever wonder if we made things harder than they needed to be?" I smiled. Maybe, but maybe that's how we learned what mattered. She looked at me then, really looked, with that searching gaze she had when she was painting, like she was trying to capture not just what was in front of her, but what it meant. Her eyes softened. "You were never supposed to stay," she said quietly. "You were supposed to pass through, like a season." "Maybe I did," I said. "Maybe we just changed the season." A breeze moved through, gentle but cool. Without a word, she reached for my hand. Her fingers were warm, steady, the kind of touch that didn't ask for anything, just was. We stood there, watching the last bit of light fade behind the hills. After a while, she spoke again, her voice barely above the sound of the wind. Maybe the line was never meant to keep us apart. Maybe it was just there so we'd notice it and decide together whether to cross it. I turned to her, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes. Just quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't need promises. I didn't say anything. I just squeezed her hand, feeling the pulse beneath her skin, steady, sure, alive. As the sky dimmed, she rested her head lightly against my shoulder. I could feel her breathing slow, matching mine. There was no grand ending, no dramatic kiss, no music swelling in the distance. Just two people standing side by side, knowing that something fragile had finally become real. And in that stillness, with her hand in mine and the sea whispering below, I realized the truth she'd been trying to teach me all along. Some lines aren't meant to be broken. They're meant to be redrawn together.